Hey,
How you doing?
good afternoon, good morning to you, Sterling. I was speaking with Sterling earlier, and look, we've had a big response to our data analytics masterclasses that we've been running over the last fortnight from all over the world, which is very exciting. And people have been asking specific questions about what data analytics really means. And the first thing they're asking me, how did you come up with these different ways of looking at a match? And I think just as importantly, they were saying, why do you have these metrics or these things that are so different from what's gone before? So, when people are watching, I don't know, let's say they're watching Wimbledon or something like that, they'll go, they'll say, yeah, but at Wimbledon, they got the unforced error section. Why don't you use that? And then then we explain that to them. And they say, well, they don't use, they don't actually count the number of shots in a point. And they go, and then why do they do that, Dan? Or why do you do that? And obviously I explained to them, and that's what we're talking about today. So really, because I think, Sterling, you've been involved in this, like this has been your project. You've kind of like turned the whole way of looking at a tennis match on its head in a brilliant way, may I add. And we've come to these really interesting metrics. And this one in particular, point rally length. And it does strike me as really strange that no one thought, hang on a minute, shouldn't I be counting the amount of shots that are made in a point? Wow, no one did that. No one did it at all. But since you helped me do this, and you helped me through my studies as a tennis coach in the last 2.5 years or so, it's been an absolute revelation. I've been like, oh my God, Sterling's right. So with that in mind, we've decided today to have a look in a little bit more detail at some of these metrics. We're going to be looking at these individually as the week goes on. And what we're going to be looking at today is specifically the PRL, okay? Not to be confused with the PLO or anything like that. PRL. So Sterling, what is PRL?
So PRL is simply stands for point rally length. And when we talk about rally length, we want to talk about the number of successful shots that last in each point. So we're not going to count the shot that went out, because that doesn't include as a successful shot, right? So that's essentially what it means, point rally length. It is one of those, it is basically, to me, I found this is the most important data metric for several reasons, and we'll go into that.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that it does fly under the radar, and there's a reason for that. I can give the reason for that. And just it's simply to say, look, when you play the game, you want the rally to last a long time because that's fun. Okay. Or maybe you're just trying to get out of the rally really quick because you're really super nervous. Okay. That's a part of it too. But when you're watching a match, the reason why you don't notice point rally length is because you're also looking for a very long rally, because that's exciting to watch. And so I think that for those reasons, we
to be specifics, then PRL is the number of successful shots
correct
that have been completed.
Correct.
So I think then people would be thinking, well, isn't that obvious? So why do we use this? Why do we use PRL at the Art of Winning?
So it does seem to be very obvious. Okay. And I think that's why it's overlooked. Some of the simplest things we overlook because they get lost in translation. We're looking for other things. Okay. So the reason why we're using this at the Art of Winning is it's the first metric that you use to decide or ask the question, what's going wrong? Why can't I make the rally length last longer, at least from my perspective as a player on my side of the court? Like what's breaking down, right? If you don't know rally length, you don't. It's hard to. You're going to start in other areas that are not typically the initial place where you want to start.
Okay. So again, to be specific, at the art of winning, we're using it because we want to find out where our player is making errors.
Correct.
And just as importantly, when they're making errors.
Correct.
We don't know that. And look, Sterling, stop me if I'm being naughty here, okay, and assuming too much. But I'd like to know at what point. Sorry, I'm thinking. I'm just thinking about that for a second because am I jumping too far ahead? No. If I've got something that I think is happening in my game, right? If I got a preconception of why I lose matches, okay, I go into that match and I look throughout the match for that preconception about why I lose points to be reinforced by everything. Yeah. So if I think my backhand's the problem, my brain will just select every possible piece of information to reinforce that preconception, that belief about my game. What I think you're saying about the art of winning is that we get out of that state of preconception. Yeah. When you say to me, and I'm going to remember it, Dan, you think your backhand's the problem. In that set, you hit 4 backhands, all of which went in.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. It's you're exactly right. We're going into the match with preconceived ideas, with what we've already thought about, maybe in the past, what we've dealt with or what we've worked on in practice. Okay. So say it's our back end. We blame everything on our back end, right? Or most things. So we practice our backhand and then we go play a match. And then we're looking for when we miss the backhand because that's the problem we think we need to solve. And it's like driving, I bought a car, I bought an Audi. And so when I drive down the road, I see all the other Audis because I'm driving one. Right. So I don't see any of the Jeeps or any of the Camaros or anything like that. Right. I just see my brand. Right. But that's because I've got that preconceived notion before I even start driving. I know.
Can I just do a thought experiment with you very quickly?
Sure.
Right, I'm going to prove to you that the problem is with you is fish. Okay. Fish are your problem. All right. Did you have a dream last night?
No.
You didn't have a dream last night. Did you have a dream the night before?
Yes.
Okay. In that dream, do you think there was it rained?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it could have rained.
Yep.
Could there have been a puddle on the floor?
Yes.
Okay. So in that puddle, do you think it's possible that puddle could have got bigger?
Sure.
Yeah. And in that puddle, do you think that fish could live in it?
Yes.
There, I told you that's your problem. Yeah, that is your problem. We'll always find fish. Okay, I can always find fish, right? And the brain works like that.
Yeah.
Okay, if we got fish on the mind, I can prove to you, and the backhand's the same in any tennis match. In we go, right?
That's right. So when you go into a point, if you count the number of shots that are successful in that point, you will find many times that it wasn't the rote backhand that you miss. Yeah. It was the backhand after the serve, or it was the backhand after the return, or maybe it could have been the return backhand, which is not a ground stroke. It's actually a return of serve. It's a different type of stroke, right? So you may be practicing that backhand, but you're practicing it out of context because you're not bringing it into the context of point rally length. So when did you make the error? And then that leads you to the why.
Why do you think, though? And here's my why right now. Why didn't data analysis before the art of winning? Why didn't it use PRL?
Well, when I started this back in 2011, I had never seen any data on point rally length watching a match, right? Like you watch it on TV, they bring up the stats. You've got errors, unforced errors, winners, break points. You have all these other stats, but there was nothing about point rally length in 2011. Okay, now IBM started showing it more like 2014, 2015. I know there are a handful of coaches around the world. One of them being Craig O'Shaughnessy, and the other being Frank Giampaolo. Some of us, they used point rally length, but you've never seen it like you see it now. It's become more prevalent. It's out in the open. It's probably because some of us guys have really shined the light on it. So when I discovered it, almost 10 years ago, then I started using it. I thought everyone used this. I thought everyone thought about point rally length. I thought everyone was counting. I thought, well, I've stumbled on something everybody knows. And until I started getting into it, and then I ended up meeting Craig in 2015, he was like, Sterling, you've stumbled across something, especially in junior tennis, because no one was doing it in junior tennis. He was doing it more on the pro level. And he had done some on the junior level, but in his neck of the woods. But he's like, no one has done the amount of data on junior tennis you've done. So I think it's just, you're starting to see it more now because it's getting out there. But it's still, there still is a misconception around point rally length and why points last so short and why they don't last very long. And there's a lot of speculation about the why, and I think it's based more on the content, how and what you hit versus content, when, where, and why.
But then how did you discover that PRL was important?
Okay, so in 2011, I was coaching high school tennis, and I had a lot of players that were at different levels. So I had players that were, state ranked, sectionally ranked, like really good players. And then I had all the way down to sort of a recreational high school player, right? So I had different levels, which was great. I could measure this across the board because I wanted to see if there was a difference between the rally length of really fine players that could really play, and then versus players that were just starting out. So what I did was I was watching two of my top players play points, serve, return, and we were preparing for a match. And all of a sudden, it's like my eyes were open. It was like an epiphany. It's like a revelation. All of a sudden, I started to realize how short the points were, back to back to back. It was serve, return, out. Serve, return, next ball, out. Serve, return, out. I'm like, these points aren't lasting. So I had the girls stop, and I said, wait, I want you to play points, but I want you to take away the serve and return in S1R1. For shots after the serve and return. Just drop feed the ball cross court and play out the point competitively. Still keep score. So they were still competitive. They just took out sort of that dynamic of the first two. Point rally length doubled immediately. So the 2-shot rallies went to 4. The 3-shot rallies went to 6. Then I have them introduce the serve and return back in, and the point rally length dropped back in half again. And I'm like, am I seeing something like, is this an anomaly? Is this just these two players, or is something going on here? So what I did was I developed the point tracking chart, and I basically put it in the hands of every player of mine that wasn't playing a match, and they would track each other's matches on point rally length. All we were doing was counting the number of successful shots, then writing it down, and we would write first or second serve, whether it was a first or second serve that was played. And that's it. And then I started to look at the numbers, and I spent hours and hours going through to see if there were patterns. And lo and behold, a pattern emerged. 0 to 4 shots were ending between 55 and 75% of the time. So I kind of rounded that into a 60 to 70% range. And then the next shots, I divide them into 5 to 8. And now remember, I had not met Craig O'Shannessy. I had not talked to anyone. I just started to see a pattern of when points were like sections of points, right? The first 2 shots that each player hits, the next 2 shots that each player hits. And then from there on, it was +9 extended rallies, right? So it was 0 to 4, 5 to 8, +9. Then 5 to 8, if 0 to 4 was around 60 to 70%, 5 to 8 ended up being between 15 and 30%. And then another 0 to 15% was +9. And it happened in every match at every level on all the way down the line. Line 1 through line 6, line 1 doubles through line 3 doubles. And I'm like, this is crazy. And you could see some shifts in the percentages based on, the type of players you were watching. But for the most part, they were neatly sort of organized in these percentages around 60 to 70, 20 to 30, and then under 10% for the most part. And so it completely, I changed my whole perspective of practice at that point, because I thought if 60, 70% of the points are ending 0 to 4, doesn't each player need to be proficient or at least know what they'd like to do on the first 2 shots?
Well, that's led to our first. We have 12 principles at the art of winning. It's a bit like the 10 Commandments, but for tennis. And number 1 of those, I'd say the most important and the biggest, I think the most transformational of the principles is what we call 70-20-10. But there's an important point to that principle. So 70% of points are over within 4 shots, 20% between 5 and 8, and then 10% 9+. But there's the second part of that principle, which I think is equally as important, that occurs at top level all the way down to club.
Yes.
All the way down to the kid. Right.
Let me tell you the reason why is because the competition on each level is about the same, right? The only time we see the numbers.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that?
So
because I've not thought about it that way.
Okay, so if 2 8-year-olds are playing or 2 9-year-olds are playing, they're playing at basically the same level. Okay, and 2 14-year-olds in high school and on up and then all the way up through college and then pro, right? That's why the numbers are staying about the same, is because the competitive level at each is about the same. Now, the only time the numbers change drastically is if a player is that much better than another player. And actually the numbers go lower. The rally length or the points end shorter because that dominant player is able to end the point quicker or the other player is just not able to respond. So that's why the numbers hold true. And my experience in the beginning was purely on the junior level, from 10-year-olds to 18, 19-year-olds. And that was the bulk of my data from 2011 to 2014, 15. And then when I met Craig, I started looking into the pro numbers and then the college numbers. And then we started talking about, hey, we need to try to get more colleges and more major junior tournaments like the Orange Bowl and some of the major junior Grand Slams to start looking at that as well. We still haven't touched. We're at the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even touched this, and we're like 9 years in, right? Because there's still a lot of debate around it. But to me, there's only subjective opinion, because you've got to look at what are the facts. Look, I saw a movie a long time ago. It's called Moneyball, and it was about the baseball statistics that the Oakland Athletics in America did, and the manager. There's a principle in baseball. You can't score runs unless you get guys on base. You've got to get people on the base in order to have the opportunity to score a run. Okay. And so I just apply that to tennis. There's no way you can win the point unless you make shots. Because we all know the last person that hits the last shot wins the point. So it's shot rally length is the beginning of understanding how to play to win the game, right? And let me just say this: 0 to 4, we call it the first. It's called the first strike part of the point. Well, I call it the first strike stage. That first strike is not. It sounds offensive, but you can play the first strike stage of the point defensively. You can neutralize your opponent within first strike, play more neutral as far as shots that neutralize your opponent, or you can play offensive. So when you talk about first strike, just try not to let your brain go to the assumption that you're training to end the point on the first 2 shots. That's not at all what we're talking about, right? That's just a one-dimensional mindset with first strike. First strike is the stage of the point you're in. The next stage, 5 to 8, is patterns of play. That's when they begin to develop, and then you have extended rallies.
Yeah.
We're talking about stages of the point and when points end and why. See, so point rally length is going to lead us to the why questions.
Okay, but the just coming right back to these numbers here. I mean, what immediate impact do you think this has had on you as a coach?
I've totally looked at the way I set up my practice time differently. And because at the time when I discovered it and started implementing it and drawing up the plans, I had a great pool of players. And I had 2 hours of practice every 5 days a week with 12 players, right? And so I was able to set up the court. So what I did was I just basically, and this is the thing that fascinated Craig when he interviewed me on his first 4 shots program at Brain Game Tennis, is I actually took my practice and divided it up like the sections of a point. I said, okay, if we're going to spend 60% of our practice time training 0 to 4, we're going to spend 25 to 30% of our time training 5 to 8 shots. And then we spend 10% of our time doing extended rallies. And so what I did was I took the warm up, and that was our extended rally practice, right? Let's see how many balls you can make consecutively over the net. Let's see, can you get to 20? Can you get to 30? Counting in certain different ways, okay? And that was our warm up. Players were warming up their rhythm and timing, right? Then after that, we immediately went into first strike training. We started rehearsing the serve, then the serve, and then the first shot after the serve, then rehearsing the return and rehearsing the return in R1. So that's why I called it transforming the practice court. I reversed engineered the practice court and made it look and feel more like the match court or what you would experience in match play. And it had an immediate effect. I'm not talking it took a few weeks to get the players' mindsets to start changing, but the winning percentage of the matches started to increase immediately. And I started to see results in changing the mindset of a player to focus on making those first 2 shots, make them intentionally with a pattern that you like. And we started out super simple. Really, it was make the first 2 shots. If your life depended on it, do whatever you can to make that ball back in the court. We literally started there, and then we started to develop. Okay, what comes next? What's the next?
Okay, so when I'm looking at when I've been studying the trends, on what we can kind of extrapolate when we're looking, particularly at PRL, particularly how many shots were made in each point, and I'm we've got a very, very interesting lot of data that's come back, but we can see the trends. And one of those trends, you've just said it. Okay, you get 2 shots in on every point, you're going to win the match, or you're going to win that set.
Yeah, because here's what happens: when you make the first 2 shots, now you put the pressure on the other player to answer in kind, right? Back.
But I think that is really important and for people to grasp, because again, it's the simplicity of this point. The match is not determined by the outcome of rallies that are more than 5 shots, or points that have PRLs of more of 5+.
Yep.
Right. So if you're winning more of those, that does not determine the outcome.
Right. Now I want to say this, because this is a lot of the kickback that goes with this data, is people say, yes, but those other, 5 to 8 shot rallies and +9, they matter because, they had that long rally and then it turned the match, and they talk about the psychology. Okay. It's true that a point, you can have break point in between one of the other sections of the rally length, right? But the problem with that is you're not recognizing where the majority of the points are decided. Okay. And this is why we at the Art of Winning have dived into the ideas of momentum score versus game score. We've dived into all of these other areas because there is a psychological effect that can happen to any player at any stage of the match.
Yeah.
And we tend to put a lot of emphasis on that extended rally, that 21-shot rally, and it just turned the match around. Well, why did it turn the match around? Here's my thought. You have focused so much on that one point that now you have started to pull away and dismiss the next 3 points you are about to play, because the next 3 points that you're about to play, two out of 3 of them are going to end 0-4. That's only 2 shots for you. And so what you've done is you've put all your emphasis on that long point or that break point that ended, past 5 shots. You focus too much on that. You don't let it go. You hold on to it. And then it shifts your mindset away from the focus and concentration on the first 2 shots.
That's another preconception, isn't it? So we're carrying in this belief that isn't actually explicit, or isn't as explicit as something like a technical defect of our backhand, but we're carrying into each point or into each match this belief that we're inconsistent, for example. And that's what I'd say that's people normally, when they're asked, why did you lose that set? They'll refer to something technical first, normally, right? The second thing they will say, almost without exception, is that I'm not consistent enough. And that's exactly what you've just said, Sterling, because their mind gets caught up in this preconception that it was the long rallies that determine the outcome, and they believe that they're not consistent enough and that they need to be more consistent. And that's really deceptive, because everyone could be more consistent, right? But it's where you're consistent.
There you go. It's when players say I wasn't consistent enough. And even some coaches will drive this idea of being consistent.
Some coaches.
Some
coaches will drive this.
I'm being generous.
Okay.
Here's the point, though.
Yeah.
When we say consistent, we are inferring the long, consistent rally. Our inference, or we project that to be long rallies. You are inconsistent in first strike. You're inconsistent on the serve and then the next shot, the return and the next shot. That's where every single player on the planet is the most inconsistent at. Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, Serena Williams, Halep, all of them, they are the most inconsistent on the first strike stage of the point, 0-4.
There you go. Here's the beauty of what you've discovered, and it's you that's I'm not overrating when I say that you did. What it would be much more accurate to say that Federer is less inconsistent in the first 4 shots rather than consistent, right? Because that's where the matches are won and lost. It's the inconsistency levels that are kept low, right? That's a much better way of describing what occurs.
Yes.
But didn't we find that the battles in the first 4 shots, right, the first strike zone of the point, that first section, that no one won? if they didn't win it didn't win in that first strike section.
Okay. Let's use a very fresh example. Djokovic and Nadal in the French Open, 2020 French Open. Okay, the numbers came out. +9 extended rallies, they both won 50%. 0-4, Rafa won 41% of those points, and Djokovic won 29%, somewhere in that area. So here's what happened. Djokovic went into that match thinking Rafa is just going to grind him into the dirt. And Rafa went in that match and goes, no. I'm going to attack you more, or I'm going to do more in the first 2 shots than you would normally expect me to do. And Rafa put enormous pressure on Djokovic in the French Open this year. And so that's the idea, is you have to determine it. First of all, you've got to know the points are ending there. First of all, if you don't know that, then there's nowhere to begin. Okay. Second, once you know that, is how do I adjust and arrange the way I play the first strike, right?
Yeah.
Gilles Simon, right? He's a defensive player by nature. He plays more defensive in the first strike. That's his nature, right? Or that's his game plan, right? Or it could be anything, right? You could be back and forth. The point I'm trying to make is my study in this has been really about the psychological effect of point rally length, the link between the psychology of playing a point and the rally length of a point. It wasn't just pure numbers. It was, I wanted to know why and what was going on in the mind of the player when that happened, right? And so this is my expertise in this, is I've dug way down deep in this. I've peeled the onion back. Craig O'Shaughnessy calls me the mad scientist because I'm done, and I've got the beard and the hair for it now. So I'm good. Okay, thanks to COVID. But yeah, I'm diving down into this deep because I'm just peeling back. And every time I peel it back, you know what's interesting, Dan? It always goes back to the foundation of you've got to know the rally length of your match. So let me go back to the beginning just real quick. When I was working with these girls on the high school team, I'd go by and every player had a chart for their match. So I'd walk over, and we got to do coaching on changeovers. So I'd walk and I'd look at the chart and I would scan it really quick and I would run the numbers in my head and I would get the average rally length of the last 2 games that player just played. And they would come up. And the first question I would ask my player is, what's the average rally length right now of the last 2 games? And almost across the board at every level, I would get answers like, it's 4 shots, it's 6 shots, it's 5 shots. I said, it's 2. 2 is the average rally length of points you've played the last 2 games. They look at me shocked. Why? Because they remember the long points. Why? Because they're long. You don't remember short points because they're short. And you dismiss them. So, but the numbers, if you run the numbers don't lie. That's what they say. So I would I'd use it as a coaching tool, and I'll say, okay, go out, play the next 2 games, and I want you to focus solely on making your first 2 shots with the patterns that you like the best, right? If you get a forehand on the return, go to your best spot. You get the next shot, go to your best shot. And that's all I said to them. And I walked away. My coaching sessions went from 35 seconds to 10 seconds, right? And then my girls would go out and they would just start reeling off points. And I could see the frustration in the other player. How simple that concept was, just frustrated the other player. And it was that's when I saw that happen, it was over. I was 100% believer, and then I had to start just changing things in practice and work on mindsets.
So that's it. I mean, the major trend, I think, is that points are short.
Points are short. They're
much shorter than we think they are, or we perceive them to be, if we perceive it at all. And we practice assuming that the points are long.
Yep.
That's what happens. And I think those would be the trends I'd look at. But my final question would be, what should you be looking for in the matches that you're studying? So people that are watching this, let's say that they want to get into data analytics, they've got our course there or access to it. And if you don't, please email me and I shall send it out immediately to you with the data charts and the explanations that we're working on here. So what would you say, Sterling, when people start to plot these matches, be they a coach, a parent, or a player? What would you be looking for, particularly at the beginning, particularly if you're new to this and you're into your first couple of matches?
Right. So let me just say it like this. If I went out and watched you for the first time, the first thing I'm going to look for is, okay, how many are you, let's say you're returning serve. Are you missing forehands or backhands? And which side of the court are you missing them on? So if you're returning on deuce, when you miss a return, was it a backhand or forehand from deuce? And then on ad. So I'm just going to be making a little note of that. And then on the return side, when you go to the R1, the first shot after the serve, are you missing forehands and backhands? Which one, right? Same thing on the serve. So as a player, pay attention to, are you hitting more backhand returns than you are forehand returns?
Yeah.
Are you giving up the opportunity to hit a forehand? Are you just settling for a backhand return? Okay, so when someone lobs in a second serve, are you just turning and hitting the back, or are you just running? Are you running around getting a forehand? Pay attention to the first two shots. What are you doing with the ball? Where are you placing the ball? Right? Are you trying to go for lines right off the first two shots? Are you playing more through the middle of the court? Do you have a serve that is dependable if you need to make a first serve? So I tell my players, if you double fault, the next first serve, you've got to make, because you don't want to put double pressure on you and have the opportunity or give yourself an opportunity to double fault twice in a row. That's it. That's a killer, right? So, but it's the rally length you should pay attention to. Are you making your first two shots, right? And you can simply count, right? You can count yourself. Play the first point. Did I make my first shot? First two shots? Yes, check. Next point. Did I make my first two? And so this is how we actually rehearse in practice now. And we've got tons of games on the artofwinningtennis.com. We're putting more in as we go every day and every week. So especially in transforming the practice court, that portal, that took me 2 years to build and develop that just one portal. And it's loaded with all kinds of challenges, and I call them challenges, not drills, but challenges to challenge a player to make two forehands in a row, from return side and things like that. So yes. So are you hitting more forehands than backhands? Are you following your serve with a forehand? Are you following your serve with a backhand? It's the other thing you want to look at. And then you have a place to start in practice. Once you go to practice, right? You can start serving in places where you get more forehands, or you start to really hunt for forehands after the return or the serve.
That's been brilliant. That's really helped clarify down in my head. And we do need to be continually looking at PRL, because it's a game changer. It's a life changer once we really start to look at and see that it represents what really happens in a tennis match, PRL.
Right. And it's making your first two shots is less about how it happens and what kind of shot you hit. It's more about where are you hitting that shot, right? Because we found that we put targets up and we put them right in the middle of the court, like take the return there, take the R1 there. Doesn't matter what you hit. I don't even care how you hit it. Just get it there. Then we'll talk about the how and the what later. We'll address that.
And that's what we're going to do next time. We're going to be looking at the how and the what. And what were they? What were those first two shots?
Right.
Because PRL is one part of a very, very important equation. It's like algebra. That's PRLs on one side, then we bring in the rest of them and we balance that equation out. And we can't do that without knowing what PRL is. So that's the fuel really of our data. And that's what makes it so exciting, because once we've started to do this, not only does it change the way we perceive the game, the way we practice, and also has a massive impact on our results, but it also starts us to look at the bigger, helps us to look at the bigger picture. And I think next time we'll be looking at the other side of the equation, which is what was that first strike pattern?
Right.
Forehand, backhand, and so on.
I do want to say this last thing before we leave.
Yeah.
When you start to focus on the first two shots and making those consistently over and over again, the rest of the point you begin to become more consistent the rest of the point. The next
That's a really important point. Can you say that again?
Yeah. Because, when we did the data, we started to see that players that train 0 to 8 shots, right, which is 4 shots, right, for you.
Yeah.
So 8 shots total for both players. So when you begin to train the first 4 shots, 2 plus 2, okay, you actually become better at extended rallies. And so we've had players actually win more points in the extended rally phase against their opponent, but not training in that. They only train in practice. They train 0 to 8, the point's over, and we start over, right? And then some games we extend it, some games we don't. But for the most part, most of a player's practice is 0 to 8 shots total, right? That's if I'm playing someone, right? So I'm only hitting 4 shots in practice, and then I'm done. Then I start the point over. Your percentage of extended rally will actually increase. And there's a reason for that. It's called flow. Once you get into the flow, once you get into a point, you become more relaxed, you become into it. Things happen a lot more fluid. So there's a psychological effect of that. But it's beginning the point is the most difficult part of playing and winning the point, is beginning the point well. And design it based on what the score is, design it based on what your preferences are as a player.
Great. That has been very interesting, I hope. And we'll see you next time when we're going to be looking at those first strike patterns. Thank you.